just going to ask you to introduce yourself and your role with the Canadian Armed Forces.
My name is Randy Brooks. I'm a retired colonel in the Canadian Army Reserve. I was a reservist from 1969 when I joined until 2009, so 40 years later when I retired. I was asked to come back as an honorary colonel for a 9-year period after that as well. So altogether about 49 years of service with the Army Reserve, mostly with the Regina Rifle Regiment.
And you did go on a tour, like you mentioned to me, so can you just kind of explain where you went and when
Yes,
that was?
yes, actually, having served for in the Army Reserve for 40 years, it was at year 35 that I got a phone call in my classroom, and it was the commanding general asking me if I would be interested in deploying to Afghanistan on a tour. He described the duties and said that it's a bit, well, he called it a short fuse, which means a decision has to be made right away. And so I basically said, I've been doing this for 35 years, so I'm ready. Put me in, coach, I'm ready.
Yeah.
So I made the decision at that time, and I've not regretted it.
So with this tour, how did you tell your friends and family that you were going overseas, and were there any conversations that stood out to you at that time?
I met my wife for the first time in the Army Reserve, and then later on as a university student at the University of Regina. She had served for 26 years in the reserves, mostly full-time. In fact, full-time after we were married to put me through school so that I could go on to become a teacher.
Wow.
And then our 3 kids were all involved in cadets or in the reserves or at Royal Military College, and then in the regular force. So ours is a military family.
Right.
We know that the peak experience for us in the military would be to be asked to deploy onto an operation. So that when I was asked to deploy and I accepted right on the spot, I knew that my family, because we'd already talked about it, I knew that my family would be supportive, strongly supportive of that opportunity to serve.
And when you were overseas in Afghanistan, were you able to stay in contact with your friends and family?
I was lucky to be posted to the national capital,
Okay.
Kabul in Afghanistan. I was posted to the Corps headquarters, of the military headquarters for the American-led coalition of forces under the commanding general. And I was his principal staff officer for civilian military operations. And so being in Afghanistan for that period of time, I was essentially in that headquarters environment. Different from a lot of soldiers who would have been deployed to all kinds of different forward operating bases throughout the country. Not to say that I didn't go there to visit them, because I had responsibilities and duties to each of those. It had to do with handing over from American forces to other Allied forces responsibility for the different provincial reconstruction teams that were being developed in the country at that time. But I would like to say, though, that in my 35th year of service, when I was overseas in Afghanistan, that was also the year of our 30th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
That was also the year I turned 50. And I became officially known as the old man by the rest of the troops. You missed the holidays, you missed Christmas, but you had the satellite phone, which allowed you usually 1 call a week or 1 call during the holidays back to your family to be able to connect.
Right.
And so that was very important. And I also had an opportunity in the middle of my deployment to take a 3 weeks holiday and meet my wife in Thailand. So we were able to have our 30th anniversary. And then she came back to Canada after 3 weeks. I went back to operations in Afghanistan for the remainder of my tour of duty.
So how do you think your time in the military has affected you the most?
I think that the key things that I learned that would certainly be useful for any other person, but you learn it mostly in the military, is teamwork. Working together, realizing that you are part of a well-oiled machine, well-trained group of people who are working together, and you get to know each other, in some cases, better than you would know your own brother.
Right.
And so the whole notion of band of brothers is absolutely apt. You work together as a team, as a band of brothers. Soldiers don't die for their country. They die for their brothers. They look after them. They are prepared to break cover to go help them if necessary. It's just part of the training, and they do that. Also, the military teaches you a way of solving problems, using initiative to solve problems, and also a lifestyle that is quite minimalist, so that you've got all of your gear in your backpack and you're ready to go at a minute's notice. And so you don't want for a lot of worldly things. You have what you have on your back, and it sustains you for the time that you're away. Those are the kinds of things that soldiers learn that I think would be useful for any person nowadays, to be able to have that kind of background, that kind of information in their backpack that they can use to live through their life.
I know you said your family's a military family, so maybe this is different for you, but how do you think your family was affected most by you going overseas, or just by your time in the military in general?
You're right, a military family, right? So it's almost like the family was a team. I was the officer commanding, and my wife was the sergeant major, and my kids are the soldiers, and but that's meant more in jest than anything else.
Right.
Except that we had ways of living and operating together, and we knew what our duties were, and we did them. When I left to go overseas, it left a hole in the family. But my kids had already departed the house, and so they were now on their own. And my wife was working at the University of Regina, and so she had that duty full time. And so there were other distractions that helped to make the time go faster.
So is there anything that you wish civilians understood about the military?
Yes, there is actually, because I'd like folks to know generally that members of the regular military who have signed career contracts started as civilians. They have those civilian ideas. They're trained in the military arts. They become professional military people. And when they're finished their military service, they go back into the civilian world as civilians again. Sometimes that transition is difficult.
Right.
Reservists, a little different. You are citizen soldiers. You live and work in your community. I, as a teacher, for example, for 32 years at Luther College High School. But I also trained on a weekly basis at the Regina Armories. Also trained on a once-a-month basis weekend exercises in Camp Dundurn, south of Saskatoon, or in other camps around the country. And in the summertime, we had opportunities to either train all summer or for as little as 2 weeks in a summer to develop our skills, to go on professional development training, to take advancement courses. And then when the opportunity came along, you could volunteer a second time for an actual operational deployment overseas. So soldiers are members of the community. Now, I'm a member of the Regina community, a veteran member of the Regina community. But there are lots of young, current serving members of the Royal Regina Rifles who are found in every walk of life within the community of Regina, and where they live and serve in a civilian capacity, and then when it's time requires it, put the uniform on and serve in a military capacity. There's lots of room in the Army, in the Navy, in the Air Force for people who want to become full-time career members. Lots of room. There's also lots of room for folks who might be interested in staying in their own community, but helping to serve Canada in a occasional part-time and occasional full-time basis as their life circumstances allow. Lots of room for that kind of commitment on the part of young Canadians today.
So is there anything that you would like to share about your time in the military to help civilians understand that war still affects Canadians today?
The nice thing about being a Canadian is you don't have to think about war every day. And in fact, it's something that can be far back in the back of your mind, or in some cases, don't think about it at all. We have that luxury of being far away from all of the places where there is conflict. Except that conflict can come to our doorstep at any time. September 11th was an example of that, when conflict came to North America with the potential to come to Canada. So the Canadian government of the day, supporting the American government and other countries who agreed, were of an agreement that in order to protect Canadians from a fight that could come to our doorstep at any time, we would go to where the fight originated, and in this case, Afghanistan, because we, the soldiers, are prepared to fight on behalf of Canadians to protect them from war by fighting it there so that we don't have to fight it at home. I would also like to say that because we have the luxury of not having to worry about that, it's possible to be lulled into a false sense of security. We do not know how close conflict is to us, but we keep it at bay as much as we can by having our soldiers go out there to defend our peace, our order, and our good government, to defend the Canadian values, the Canadian way of life, and to protect our Canadian citizens.